Is how tonight's event will proceed. The candidates will each have 2 minutes for an opening statement, during which they may introduce themselves, explain why they decided to run for the office of state's attorney, and describe what unique qualifications or experiences they have to be an effective state's attorney. Then we will have 6 questions to be answered by each candidate. 2 minutes will be allowed for each candidate to answer each question. There will be no rebuttal. Finally, we will have closing statements from each candidate with a time limit of 2 minutes each. Closing statements can be used for rebuttal if desired. Candidates, please watch the countdown timer, which is in the upper right in a very small box. If you see your time has expired, go ahead and finish your sentence, but please conclude your remarks promptly at the end of your time. We will alternate who answers a question first, but that means each candidate will answer 2 questions in a row. Candidates, do you have any questions?
No, thank you.
Okay. If not, we will start with Marsha Cascio-Hale's opening statement. These statements have a 2-minute time limit. Ms. Cascio-Hale, you may begin.
Thank you, Mary. My name is Marsha Cascio-Hale, and I am the Democratic candidate for Jackson County State's Attorney. Again, thank you to the League of Women Voters and Carbondale Public Library for having me on tonight. Just a little bit about my background. I grew up in Northern Illinois, got married, had a child, got divorced, and moved down here to Southern Illinois to go to SIU Law. And that was in 2006 that I moved to Jackson County. My goal has always been to be a public servant, and during law school, I worked in all of the potential clinics we could have had: the legal practice clinic, domestic violence clinic, and the mediation clinic, and then also Land of Lincoln, all of these things serving the public good. I graduated with my JD in 2009 and then my master's in 2010. And since graduation 15 years ago, I've done family law, criminal law. I've been in private practice, public defender's office in Jackson County, 5th District Appellate Court, and I was unanimously appointed to the Williamson County State's Attorney. Currently, I'm back working in family law so that should you choose me to be your state's attorney, I won't have any conflicts in entering the office. And just a little bit about my time in Williamson County. While I was state's attorney there, I had a staff of 13 and I had 9 assistants with full caseloads. During my first week, I met with everybody I could there, elected officials, judges, staff, to see what the issues were. And there were 2 issues that kept popping up: a victim's advocate and a juvenile advocate. And these were positions that had been open for a long amount of time. Within 30 days, I saw the need, I filled it, it was done. And I was so pleased, and I received so much positive enforcement. Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Cervantes, you may begin your opening statement.
Thank you so much. It's good to be back. You hosted this, League of Women Voters hosted this 4 years ago, and I thank you once again for doing that. And thank you to the Carbondale Library. They've been a very important partner in a lot of different endeavors from our state's attorney's office and around the community. So thank you very much. I'm Joe Cervantez. I'm the Jackson County State's Attorney. I was elected in December of 2020, and I took office on December 1st, 2020. I moved to Carbondale in 1996, and I've been living in and around Carbondale ever since. I attended undergrad in SIU, lived in Allen Hall right on campus, moved off campus, lived on Beveridge in college, and did the whole college thing at SIU. Proud to be a Saluki. I took my graduate courses at SIU, and I graduated law school from SIU. I had an opportunity to be in the Marine Corps. I'm a veteran of the United States Marine Corps and Marine Corps Reserve. I'm a combat veteran. I did several combat tours in Iraq. And then later I had a privilege of working for NATO as a trainer. At one point in the Marine Corps, I had the honor of leading over 204 Marines. that were infantry Marines in a battalion. So I'm proud of my military service. In my last decade of practicing law, I have extensive experience as a trial attorney. I did not do anything else. No research position, no moving around, no extra businesses. I dedicated my life to something that was important to me after a major in criminal justice. I went in to be a prosecutor as a Williamson County State's Attorney, Assistant State's Attorney, then a Saline County Assistant State's Attorney. And I have experience as a trial attorney, as a prosecutor, and as a defense attorney, actual real-time courtroom experience. And also worked in federal court and state court in both criminal and civil law, and had several experiences and instances where I was able to represent municipalities and county boards. So I'm proud of my experience. Look, I ran on a platform 4 years ago of change, and that's what I did. I came in and changed the office. 7 of our 8 attorneys are brand new. Our staff is stronger than ever. And I'll tell you that I wanted transparency in the office, and we have better transparency. So thank you, and I'm honored to be here in this forum. And I want to thank my opponent too for coming out and debating with me tonight.
Thank you,
so
Mr.
much.
Cervantez. Now we will proceed with the first question, starting with Ms. Marsha Cascio-Hale. There is a 2-minute time limit to answer each of the questions. Question number 1. Illinois statutes list 13 duties of the state's attorney, including the broad duty to perform such other and further duties as may from time to time be enjoined on him by law. How do you prioritize the functions of the state's attorney's office? What responsibilities would you feel obligated to perform yourself, and which do you feel comfortable delegating to your staff, including the assistant state's attorney?
Okay, that's a loaded question. So in terms of prioritizing, obviously, the things that are on fire are the things that you deal with first. However, there are also long-term goals that you need to consider. Long-term goals such as getting cases through the system quickly and expeditiously and effectively. The first priority would be to get those cases through, to ensure that every case is treated individually. And so each state's attorney, each assistant would have to have some expertise in each of these cases. So my thought is each assistant would have to have a docket. And that's how it was in Williamson County. So each individual assistant would have their own docket, and they would have an expertise in that docket. That would mean they were able to be trained and understand what's going on in each situation. So they had the knowledge on how to start at the very beginning all the way through trial. The things that I would want to do myself would be policy, obviously, and the murder trials. And my whole thing as well is with a new set of assistant state's attorneys, individuals need to be trained. And I strongly believe that second chairs should be provided, cases should be tag teamed at least until individuals feel strong enough to do cases on their own. I think experience is necessary, and putting people into the courtroom is something that we need to do. So that would be my priority in terms of training individuals, getting the dockets pulled together, and getting cases through to fruition. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. Mr. Cervantez.
Yes. So I think you're talking about the priorities of the office. They change on a daily basis. Let me tell you, you can have all these different people supporting you and waving your signs, writing letters, but I'm going to tell you that as soon as you close that door and you're in that seat by yourself, everything changes. The priorities of the office change minute by minute, hour by hour, and day by day. And so there are priorities in the office, and that's to do right, to do the right thing. When cases come across your desk, you look at them and you put them to the place where they need to be, and you do the right thing. It's really just as simple as that. However, my opponent mentions that there needs to be experience. That's absolutely right. If she were elected, she would be the least experienced attorney at trial in the entire office. I have a law student who graduated and got barred in October, who's already done more trials than my opponent in her entire career. And so she's exactly right. And I like her. She's always been very kind to me. But I'd like in her rebuttal, because she talked about how experience is so necessary in second seats. I'd like her to explain about the murder trials that she's done, the shooting trials, the sexual assault trials, the child pornography trials. These are real things. And again, as I've always said, this is not a political office. And she's always wanted to serve the public. But at no time since we've been short prosecutors in Southern Illinois at just about every state's attorney's office have I ever seen a resume from Ms. Cascio-Hale. And so I love that she wants to get involved with prosecution and that she thinks that experience is necessary to try these cases, but she has to hold herself to the same standard. If you think experience is necessary to try a case, then you need to have experience.
Thank you, Mr. Cervantes. Now for question number 2, we start with Mr. Cervantes. In addition to prosecuting crime, what do you see as the role of the state's attorney in preventing crime, particularly gun violence? How would you work with local community entities such as schools, businesses, and social service agencies to prevent crime?
This is so important.
As you may begin.
This is so important, and I'm glad you brought this up. There's many state's attorney's offices, and by the way, in the last, not to divulge, but the one docket policy per attorney is one way to do it. But there's many state's attorney's offices around the state that have a vertical prosecution or horizontal prosecution, and we have a mixed horizontal and vertical prosecution in our office. But to this specific question, not the last one, it's very, very important. Preventing crime to some state's attorneys is something that is overlooked. Like in my predecessor's offices, one of the reasons why I ran in the first place, Mr. Clemens, Mr. Schwartz, Mr. Websick, this gang of prosecutors worried about the cases that were coming across the desk and not necessarily in crime prevention. Crime prevention is in the sphere of the state's attorney. How I work with community groups is exampled by my last 4 years. I have connections with many of the community groups, not just in my last 4 years, but in my last 10 years in Carbondale, attending marches, protests, benefits, dinners over the last 10 years. But we established programs by talking with them and asking them what their needs are. Restorative justice programs, sitting kneecap to kneecap with people from Carbondale United in my office with defendants or juveniles or victims. These are all programs that we work. Some of the most recent ones is our gun lock program, which those specific gun locks go to community organizations for them to pass out. Other ones like our video doorbell program, which just got launched, those go to victims and witnesses that are justice involved. Others like using our victim asset and forfeiture funds to sponsor things like the Midnight Basketball program at the Detman Center. Other things like Job Corps, where we've just recently been in discussions to get 20 positions at Job Corps for young men and women to go and live and learn a trade in St. Louis. I want to work myself out of a job. I want to do it every single day. And eventually I'll be able to walk away and say that we have less prosecutors than we did when I started. That's my job.
Thank you, Mr. Cervantes. And now, Ms. Cascio-Hale, you may answer the same question.
Thank you. My intention when I get into the office is to work on very specific issues. I have an anti-bullying collaborative that I want to start where I would work with school superintendents, counselors, parents, and individuals throughout the community to help ensure that individual children are aiming their anger and hostility not toward other people, but are able to get that emotion out in a controlled setting to help them move forward from that. I also have an anti-human trafficking and a domestic violence expansion of benefits. One of the things I believe is important, sorry, that's my dog, I believe is important is to ensure that the programs last longer than the state's attorney, or at least throughout the entirety of the state's attorney's time in office. Some of the programs that my opposition was talking about that he has incited are failing. They are not continuing. For instance, the Ready to Play program. There's musical instruments that are sitting mute. And, you know, so it's one of those, I want to start a grant program. I want to hire a grant writer to help some of these social programs to get money to be able to help with the reporting so that these programs can consistently run into the future. We have great ideas, but we need to make sure that we have consistency and that we're not letting down our community. This is not a one and done. And I think we need to look into the future to make sure that that is settled and secure. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cascio-Hale. Now, question 3, starting with Ms. Cascio-Hale. Illinois has implemented the Safety, Accountability, Fairness, and Equity Today Act, known as SAFETY, which has a number of provisions, including the cashless bail provision. Explain what you see as the role of the state's attorney in implementing the SAFETY Act, and how is safety working now in Jackson County? You may begin.
Oh, thank you. I was already unmuted. The Safety Act, and I think we've talked about this before. I was for the Safety Act, and it's my understanding from all of the realms that this is working. We have individuals that would have been incarcerated or held until their trial for just $100 worth of bond to get out. They lose their families, their cars, their jobs, sometimes their kids, and all just for $100. So I believe the Safety Act is working. One of the things that I think we could do better is utilize the Safety Act when we are when the state's attorney's office is filing petitions to detain. In those petitions to detain, we can actually ask for ankle monitors. We can ask for individuals to attend drug treatment or counseling sessions. These are things I think we can help move somebody's case forward faster so that they get their case throughout the system and completed in a more timely fashion. I believe that if we give them the tools before we get to trial, we have an opportunity to use those successes in the offer that we get to give them, the plea offer, as well as the sentence we're going to ask for. It makes absolute sense to help individuals get on the path of treatment, sobriety, and to start their counseling early so that they can move forward and potentially have a better outcome in their case. I think that is the state's attorney's responsibility. And I think good outcomes can be had both for deterrence and prevention, as well as to make sure that there is no further criminal activity. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Cervantez, you may answer the same question.
Thank you so much. Well, there's a lot to the Safety Act, and it's hard to do this. I would need 2 days to talk and not 2 minutes. But I was part of the lawsuit along with 64 other state's attorneys, and part of the consensus of 100 of 102 that this was a bad idea. And there's a lot of, you can't say that it's working and you can't say that it's not working. There's too many parts to it. I led my office during COVID, and I led my office during the largest substantive change in the criminal justice process in probably the history of our criminal justice system. It was extensive, and to put it in place and implement it took a lot. There was a lot of long nights in Murfreesboro. And so the role of the state's attorney has been expanded, I think, in that you're either in jail or out of jail. It allows us to really focus on who should be detained and who shouldn't be detained. I always did that in the first place, because with bail, a lot of the things that my opponent says, you could do that in the first place. We always talked about drug addiction and counseling and services and ankle monitors. We always did that. That didn't change. We always looked at factors like whether somebody was working or whether they had kids. And in 18 different counties that it looks like I'm on record of practicing in, and over 10 years of being in a courtroom, in jails, kneecap to kneecap with defendants, I have yet to find someone who lost their house or kids for $100. Now, I'm all for making sure that we have equality and that somebody can't buy their way out of jail when others can't. And that's important. But I will always be, I have been, and I always will be against holding someone with no bond. This is the United States of America. You are innocent until proven guilty. And no matter what they call me, as far as how many trials I've done and how many sentences on violent crimes I've gotten, I will always believe that people are innocent until proven guilty. That is my guideline to do justice. And I'm not for no cash bail at all.
Thank you. Now, question number 4, starting with Mr. Cervantez. Not a day goes by without us receiving scam texts, emails, or phone calls, and too many elderly or other vulnerable people fall prey, often even those who are well educated, myself included. What can be done? What role does the state's attorney play in advocating for victims of crime?
So the advocacy of victims for crime was one of the reasons why I ran for office. I want to change. I heard from a lot of people that they weren't getting attention. And even if their cases weren't filed, they weren't getting any attention at all. I think one of my claims when I leave this office and it's all done is that I expanded victim services. And even my opponent yesterday in a debate a couple of days ago was talking about how my victim advocate is fantastic. We have backup victim advocates. We've expanded our victim advocacy program to not just include violent crimes, but to a broader definition of what victims are. Before it's very narrow. My office calls everybody from violent crimes to financial crimes to thefts to businesses, just to let them know that yes, they are victims of crimes and we are paying attention to their case. But there's more that needs to be done. I want to hire a restitution clerk to be able to reach out to businesses and reach out to financial institutions and reach out to the elderly when they've had these crimes, to keep them in connection with these crimes as the defendants go through the system. It's so important. And so right now, it's very important to make sure that our two things, that we continue to expand our victim services, add an additional victim advocate to the office. And so again, next week, we have a brand new office across the hall from our state's attorney's office that will now be a new victim advocate's office. So I'm very proud to have been expanding our victim services to the community. And then lastly, we need to make sure our prosecutors have training. Tomorrow, I will be hosting the 2nd annual Illinois Prosecutors Bar Association conference here in Jackson County. I held it for the first time a year ago, and it was the first 2 years ago, and it was the first time we've ever had a conference here in Jackson County from upstate. In fact, Williamson County at that time was the only office in Southern Illinois that did not show up to that Prosecutors Bar Association. And so I'm very proud to have that conference tomorrow and Friday and train people. We have a specific one that has to do with financial crimes, and I'm very proud of that.
Thank you. Now, Ms. Cascio-Hale, you may answer the same question.
Mary, can you repeat the question really quickly? I'm sorry.
The question had to do with especially vulnerable people falling prey to scam texts, emails, or phone calls, even those who are well educated. What can be done about this, and what role does the state's attorney play in advocating for victims of crime?
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, part of the state's attorney's job is to protect the most vulnerable, and that is the elderly as well as the young, from birth to death. I think the state's attorney's office is one of the protectors of everyone, and especially in these instances. And I will tell you, I have grandparents who've received these calls as well, who got calls that their grandson, who lives out of state, was in jail, and they were freaking out. It is so scary. So I think there potentially could be a hotline service that could be implemented where individuals could, especially the elderly, could call in and say, this is what happened. Is there a way for you to check? I think that would give more peace of mind, and that would give individuals, especially the elderly, the opportunity to be heard and to not feel foolish by calling their family or friends and asking questions. Because I think a lot of times that's the hang up in getting help, is feeling silly. And I think additionally, I think we could even open that up, because some of the most vulnerable are actually victims of human trafficking that are making these calls and making these texts. So I think there could be an additional section of the state's attorney's office to look into this, to be able to work with the federal government to say, this is what we're getting. This is the feedback we're getting from the elderly clients. Please investigate, so that they can find out and make sure that human trafficking is not happening at the same time. It seems to me that there are victims at both ends sometimes, and I think we have to keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, question 5, starting with Ms. Cascio-Hale. The recent school shooting in Georgia raises the question of, under what circumstances would you seek to have a juvenile tried as an adult? And how would you handle cases involving minors?
Thank you. This is a challenging question. As a mother, I understand what happens at school when children go to school. There is bullying, and that's one of the reasons for my anti-bullying collaborative that I want to start, as well as there's high emotions. And so each individual case would have to be looked at. And with things like school shootings, that's horrible. But there's more than just the individual. There's the entire community that is suffering, that is the victim. So to me, in looking at trying somebody as adults, trying an individual youngster as an adult, you'd have to look at factors. You know, what happened, what incited it, is there, who got hurt? I think there needs to be punishment, but we also need to see why it happened. And we need to look at that more closely so that we don't penalize or pigeonhole one individual person based on things that we don't know. So trying them as an adult, again, I would look at all the factors that are related to their case, but I would also spend time looking at the community as a whole, because the entire community would be victimized, it would be a victim, and we would need to have our community heal. Living in Jackson County, we need to make sure that we're taking care of all of our students and all of our teachers and our neighbors and their parents and their parents. And so it is more than just one easy answer to say, yes, I would try them as an adult. It would definitely have to be investigated and look at the factors to the crime. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Cervantes, you may answer the same question.
My opponent's never had a juvenile docket in a state's attorney's office and worked
That's incorrect.
every morning on a juvenile docket all the way through the day, every day of the week for years or more. And one of the things that she would have said if she had done that would be to explain that there are factors enumerated in the juvenile code that specifically allow a state's attorney to go through and consider those factors. And it shows that the courts have to consider those factors. And there are some that are more important than others. And you look at the education of the child, the education level, you look at the seriousness of the offense. And I always ask myself, did the person hurt somebody? And if this individual was in a diversion program or on juvenile probation, what is the likelihood that they would hurt somebody else again? And those are the answers for me. The criminal history, the education level, and the amount of harm they cause the community, and whether I believe based on all those factors if they'll do it again. It's not an easy decision, and my opponent's absolutely correct. And I like that she explains that it does take a lot of consideration and reviewing a lot of factors. But we've had to do this. You know, I've had to sit in the Saline County Courthouse and decide to move a juvenile case, a juvenile of 16 years old, to be tried as an adult. And it's one of the most difficult things that you can do. In Jackson County here, I've done it only twice in 4 years. And there was multiple times where we've considered it. We've sat down in a collaboration with other assistant state's attorneys. We've talked about it, but we've done it. And until you sit in that chair and you make the decision to do it, you don't really, have an answer at a debate for a state's attorney's office or a state's attorney position. This is a very difficult decision, and it has to be made case by case. But the law is very clear about the factors that are spelled out. I've done it. I'll do it again, but I never want to have to do it.
Thank you. Our final question, starting with Mr. Cervantez. There are many criminal justice challenges in Jackson County, such as drugs, homelessness, mental health, and racism, to name a few. How do you feel that as state's attorney, you would be able to address some of these challenges?
Well, I think that I have addressed them, and we continue to address them all the time. The relationship I have with law enforcement, not one individual that's retired that is on my opponent's campaign, but the actual departments. I urge anyone that's ready to vote on November 5th to reach out to law enforcement, to reach out to agencies and talk about the work that we've done in collaboration. The first thing is you got to know how to start the investigation from the very beginning and have answers and work with police from the very first shot fired, from the very first phone call. Our state's attorneys and assistant state's attorneys all around the region are now working together from county to county. The other thing is our assistant state's attorneys are on call around the clock, and we have a rotation schedule. My assistants do once every 7 or 8 weeks, and I do once every 4 weeks. And so we handle this. It's about processes. You can't even do the diversion programs and the restorative justice programs unless you file charges, because there's no way to have jurisdiction over individuals unless you file charges. When I started, these individuals that had the office before me, the state's attorneys before me, filing 300 and 400 felonies per year. In 2021, we found out how many cases just weren't being filed. 18 sex assaults by themselves filed the first year that had happened in the previous 3 or 4 years never filed. We're talking about going from 300 and 400 felonies per year to 521, to 604 in 22, to 757 in 2023. And this year we're on track for 802. It's not always anything to brag about. We don't want to have to file more cases. Part of this is because of the Pretrial Fairness Act. The other part is that we're not ignoring cases from the beginning. People ultimately have to know this is great to have a bullying program, which we have a bullying program. It's great to have these policy issues. But at the end of the day, you're a prosecutor and you have to enforce the law, and you have to know how to do that. You only learn how to do that by experience. So people have to be held accountable, and you have to have experience to know how to hold people properly accountable.
Thank you. Now, Ms. Cascio-Hale, you may answer the same question.
Thank you. First of all, I would have the office open from 8 to 4 every Monday through Friday. I'd also like to make sure that if there's a drug offense, that if we're arresting, that we do ask for pre-trial release to have drug and alcohol evaluations and random drops. I also would totally recommend for everybody to reach out to their law enforcement brothers and sisters and ask them how it's going. I have no qualms with that. I think law enforcement would love to have that conversation. And lastly, I would like to expand the use of our drug courts. I remember back in 2012 when I was in the public defender's office, when I was working with attorney Tom Moyer, drug court graduation day was always inspiring. It was something that made me, and I'm sure everyone else involved, feel like they were making a real difference in people's lives and actually changing people's lives for the better. And yes, I don't know anything about Mr. Cervantez's anti-bullying campaign, but when I reached out and I spoke to people, they said bullying was a problem. So that's one of the things that I wanted to put on my list in terms of doing my collaborative and working with the schools. No, this is not an easy thing, and the job calls for someone to stand up and make change. And I am more than willing to stand up and make change. there are many things for the state's attorney to do that are not being done currently. And yes, I see that. And there's more that can be done, that needs to be done. And I'm the person for that job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm.
To conclude the forum, each candidate has 2 minutes for concluding remarks, where they may address any rebuttal to previous questions and explain why we should vote for them for the position of Jackson County State's Attorney, starting with Mr. Cervantez.
Thank you so much. One of the blessings in my life is to be raised the way that I was raised, and then to end up as a state's attorney in Jackson County. No matter what happens, I'm blessed, and I'm glad that I was able to serve the people of Jackson County. I never forget the moments alongside law enforcement and working with the victims and victims' families in some of the biggest trials that we've done in Southern Illinois. I like my opponent. I think that she has a good heart, but her resume herself just 2 years ago explains that she is a, quote, research attorney who has a self-care group and skincare business. She relocated to Murfreesboro and is a BNI WIN chapter advocating for small businesses with a American TV business brag moment on Facebook. That was just 2 years ago. It says nothing about prosecution. It says nothing about criminal justice. It says nothing about reform. It says nothing about bullying programs. It says nothing about serving the community. And if you look, there's a period of about 9 years where she had never been in a courtroom, if you check the Illinois court records, with an actual client in the courtroom. I love that she wants to get involved, but I've never seen her resume as a prosecutor in my office or in any office in Southern Illinois. So after being a researcher in Mount Vernon in Jefferson County for almost a decade, trying to run for state's attorney in Saline County and Pulaski County, who has Lynn Chambers, by the way, she's fantastic, and Lisa Casper. She was appointed in Williamson County, ran in Williamson County as a Williamson County, advocate, and under a different name, now running in Jackson County, and along the way applied for judge twice. And so this is not about, who's the Democrat or Republican. And that's what this is being made out to be. You can attack my personal life, FOIA, all of my past information, and I'm still the same person before and after that FOIA request. The bottom line is I've proven to law enforcement, to the courts, to the judges, and to the attorneys that are not in her ring of previous state's attorneys that I can do this job. I have done this job, and I will continue to do this job if I'm afforded 4 more years as your state's attorney in Jackson County. I'm blessed to be here, and thank you so much for being able to come here and talk at this forum.
Thank you, Mr. Cervantez. Now, Ms. Cascio-Hale, you may begin your concluding remarks.
Thank you. I do feel like I should respond to the slander that Mr. Cervantez just provided the community. I did not run for state's attorney in Saline County. I did not run for state's attorney in Pulaski County. I don't know where you're getting your information. There's so much that you just said that is utterly false. Yes, I did have a skincare business, but I don't think it's anybody's business how I put food on my table. And yes, I was a research attorney because I was able, and I think that makes me a great candidate because I had the opportunity to review cases that were overturned from trials. So that means I got to see what prosecutors did wrong and what defense attorneys did wrong so that I didn't make those mistakes. And yes, I have been in a courtroom. I appreciate you saying I haven't, but that's just not true. And the fact that you claim that I've not been serving my community it's hurtful. And I want to point out really quickly that you offered me a job a year ago, 2 years ago. So I don't understand what this is, but regardless, I am the right person for the job. Jackson County welcomed me back in 2006. It's been my home. I have learned, I have roots here, And yes, I have a good heart. I appreciate you acknowledging that. And I bring that heart with me to the courtroom every time I step in there. And I also bring it every day I walk into my office. It doesn't matter where I am. I bring my heart, I bring my brain, and I bring my gumption. Because when I see a problem, I want to fix it. And right now, I'm seeing a problem. And that problem is in the state's attorney's office. I wouldn't be running if it wasn't for that problem. Thank you for your time, and I appreciate being asked to be on this panel.
Thank you. Our thanks to both candidates for appearing here this evening. If we were in person, this would be a time for applause. Please accept this virtual applause and appreciation. On behalf of the League of Women Voters, I encourage you all to continue being informed voters. Be sure to vote on November 5th at your polling places. Polls will be open from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m., or you can vote early, starting tomorrow. September 26th at the Jackson County Courthouse, and on certain dates and times starting October 16th at the Carbondale Civic Center and SIU Student Center. You can also vote by mail. Again, on behalf of the League of Women Voters, thank you, candidates, thank you, audience, and thank you, the Carbondale Public Library. Good night.
Thank you all for joining us.